There was a moving truck parked in my dead grandfather's driveway, and my own father was standing on the porch holding a key to a house that legally belonged to me. He thought he'd already won. He'd brought a rented truck the size of a small house, my brother to drive it, my mother to do the talking, and 2 cousins to stand around and make it all look official. He thought I was going to cry, or beg, or fold the way I had folded my whole life. What he didn't know was that 2 hours earlier, I had made one quiet phone call. One. From my grandfather's kitchen, with his old wind-up clock ticking on the wall. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten anyone. I just dialed a number, said a few sentences, and hung up. And by the time my father finished telling me to get my things, the person I'm Mahau was already coming around the side of the house. My name is Avery Crane. I was 34 the week my whole family decided I was a thief. And the funeral, it turned out, had only been the beginning. Let me rewind, because none of this makes sense unless you understand who I was to these people. I grew up the spare child, the one whose graduation no one drove to see. My father, Gerald, once introduced me to a neighbor as our house guest, and laughed, like it was a joke we were all in on. My mother, Brenda, was warm in public and cold at home. My younger brother, Trevor, was the golden one. The whole family had a plan for Trevor that they repeated at every holiday like scripture. Someday the lake house would be his, where he'd raise his kids. Nobody ever asked the 2 people who actually owned that lake house what they wanted. Those 2 people were my grandparents, Raymond and Joan Crane, and they were the only place I ever felt fully seen. The lake house was a low cedar place my grandfather built up over 40 years, room by room. I spent my childhood summers there. At 14, I rebuilt the rotting dock by hand, in 2 days, while everyone else was at the club. My grandmother taught me to bake bread that never once rose right, and laughed every single time. They asked me how my day was, and this is the part that broke me later, they actually waited for the answer. After high school, I went into the army. 12 years, most of it in logistics. People hear logistics and picture clipboards. They're not wrong, but a clipboard in the wrong desert is the difference between men eating and men not eating. My job was to make sure the right things reached the right people at the right time, and to write everything down, because in that work, memory is the first thing that betrays you. You document. You date it. You keep the file. When I got out, I didn't go home. I took a small apartment 20 minutes from the lake and a quiet job coordinating supply for a farmer's co-op. I told people I valued my privacy. The truth was simpler and sadder. You learn, after enough years, to stop reaching for people who keep their hands behind their backs. Then, on a Tuesday, my grandparents' small plane went down outside Asheville on the way to a friend's wedding. No survivors. I found out from Trevor, and before he asked if I was okay, before either of us said one soft word about the 2 people who raised half my childhood, my brother asked me a question. "Hey," he said, "do you know if they left a will?" I sat down on the floor and let the old clock count off seconds I couldn't feel. But I had no idea how bad it was about to get. The will was read 6 days later in the office of Walter Howeren, my grandfather's lawyer, 71 years old, slow-moving, a handshake like a vice, eyes that didn't miss much. He'd served with my grandfather in a war neither of them ever talked about. The whole family came in black. My father, arms crossed. My mother, dabbing eyes that stayed dry. Trevor, jittering his leg. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, a paralegal, which in our family made her something close to a general, sat in the back with a legal pad already open, like she'd come to take inventory instead of mourn. I took the chair by the door. I always took the chair by the door. I expected the house to go to my father. I expected the savings to be split. I expected to be mentioned maybe, somewhere near the bottom. The clock, if I was lucky. Instead, Walter read my name. Then he read it again. and again. I felt the air in the room change before I understood the words. My mother laughed. One short, sharp note with no humor in it. "There must be a mistake," she said. Walter didn't look up. "There is no mistake." He folded his hands. "Avery is the sole heir. The estate passes entirely to her." And then he let the number sit in the room like a stone dropped in still water. $40 million. The house on the lake, the land, accounts I had never known existed. The room came apart in slow motion. My father said my name like a curse. My mother said, "Soul," 3 times, as if the word itself had broken. And every single head turned and looked at me. The house guest. The spare, like I was a thief who had picked their pockets at a funeral. Walter kept going, calm as a man reading coordinates. The will had been signed 2 years earlier. 2 disinterested witnesses. A video of the signing. A physician's letter, dated the same day, confirming my grandparents were of sound mind. He said it twice, slowly, and I realized he wasn't telling me, he was telling the room. He was building a wall in front of me, brick by brick, while everyone watched. They were waiting for me in the parking lot. My father stepped in front of my car. "It should have gone to family," he said. I'd been hearing the rough edges of that sentence my whole life. Never the whole thing out loud. "I am family," I said. His face closed like a door. Trevor slouched up beside him. "You don't even live here, Avery." Then my mother did the most frightening thing of all. She softened. She put her hand on my arm, looked up with wet, careful eyes and said, "We're all grieving, sweetheart. We'll talk soon." Her voice was gentle. Her grip was not, and I had spent 12 years learning to read what people mean under what they say. My mother hadn't given up. She'd just changed weapons. That night, alone in the lake house, listening to my grandfather's clock, I made a decision that would change everything. The campaign started soft, the way these things always do before they come in hard. My phone lit up with relatives I hadn't heard from in years. An aunt I barely knew sent a paragraph about how Grandma would have wanted the family whole. A cousin sent old childhood photos of me at the lake, captioned with crying faces, like nostalgia was a lever. My mother sent a Bible verse about generosity. Trevor sent a sonogram with one line underneath. "Think about him." None of them asked how I was. Every one of them assumed I was the problem to be solved. So I did what I always do when something feels off. I made a file. I screenshotted every message, hated it, dropped it in a folder, and I answered none of them. Then they got organized. They called a family meeting, left a note slid under the door of my house. "Family meeting Sunday. Be there." Not a question. An order left in the home of the dead. I went. They had it set up like a negotiation. My father at the head of the table. My mother doing the talking. "The money," she explained gently, "the way you explain something to a slow child, would be managed by the family. A portion would clear the loan she and my father had taken for her real estate venture, the one mentioned at holidays. A portion would help Trevor and his pregnant wife with their new house. The lake house would naturally come to Trevor in time, for the children." Then she leaned forward and reached for the soft voice. "Sign it over, Avery. Do the decent thing." The whole table looked at me, my father with cold certainty, Trevor with nervous greed, my mother with that wet, weaponized warmth. And here's the part I'm not proud of. I felt the pull of it. The old family training that says peace is always worth more than your own ground. For 1 second, the house guest in me wanted to just make the fear in the room stop. Then Carol called me a few days later to give me a courtesy heads up. The family was prepared to challenge the will. Undue influence, she said. 2 vulnerable elderly people and 1 estranged granddaughter who swooped in at the end. I almost laughed. I hadn't swooped in. I'd been kept out, but then Carol got impatient. And impatient people leak. "Your mother needs this settled before the bank moves on her," she said, and caught herself half a second too late. Before the bank moves on her. I wrote it down. My mother wasn't just greedy. My mother was drowning, and drowning people don't let go. They pull you under with them. I sat on the dock that night and felt the whole cold weight of it. These people shared my blood, and not one of them was coming to stand on my side. I realized then, no one was coming to save me. I had to save myself. So I stopped reacting, and I started working the way I knew how to work. Quietly, methodically, backward from the moment that mattered. I called Walter. Not crying, I called him the way I'd call a supplier with a list. He walked me through it slowly, and what he said changed the whole shape of things. The will was as solid as a will gets. He'd drafted it himself. Undue influence has to be proven, and the burden falls on them, not me. They had nothing but their feelings and a video that buried them. Then he paused. There's something else you should know. Your grandfather added a no contest clause. I asked what that meant in plain words. It means, Walter said, that anyone who challenges this will and loses forfeits whatever bet did leave them. I sat up. They'd left them something? A token. 20,000 each. Your father, your mother, your brother. Raymond insisted on it. He said it was a test. I wrote down every word. My grandfather, dead in a field outside Asheville, had reached forward in time and laid a quiet, little trap, baited with exactly the kind of money my family could never leave alone. Then I finally read the letter my grandmother left me. It was folded inside her old Bible, pressed flat between the pages of the Psalms. She didn't waste words. She told me she loved me, and then she told me why she trusted me. A list of small things I'd forgotten I'd done. The dock I fixed at 14 and never told anyone. The Christmas card I mailed them every year from wherever the army had me. Even the years no one else remembered their anniversary. You're the only one who never asked us for a thing, she wrote. That is how we knew. And then the line that reached into my chest and stayed there. Use it the way we'd be proud of. You'll know what that means. Family is the people who would never make you prove you belong. I read it 3 times. The first time I cried. The third time, something settled in me, hard and clear, like a load finding its center on a truck. They hadn't left me a fortune. They'd left me a charge. So I did the unglamorous work that actually wins things. I filed the will for probate the moment the law allowed. Walter recorded the transfer of the lake house into my name at the county, so the question of who owned it stopped being a feeling anyone could argue and became a fact stamped by a clerk. I built a defense file, the signing video, the witnesses, the physician's letter, my grandmother's journal, my grandfather's dated notes. I made copies, then copies of the copies. I'd run supply convoys with less paperwork, week by week, quietly, methodically. They had no idea what was coming. They filed their challenge 11 days later. My father signed his name to a petition, claiming his own parents had been manipulated into betraying their only son. Then came the ultimatum, hand-delivered, in my father's blocky engineer's print. I was to vacate the lake house by Sunday. If I didn't, they would, in his words, remove you ourselves, and let the court sort it out afterward. He had it backward, of course. He thought possession was 9/10 of the law, that if they just put my things on the lawn and moved Trevor in, the courts would shrug. He didn't understand that a recorded deed doesn't care who's sleeping in the house. You cannot evict an owner, but here's what mattered most. They had named the day themselves. They told me when they were coming, how, and with what intentions. And in doing that, they handed a logistics officer the one thing she values above everything else, advance notice. I didn't plan a confrontation. I planned a Sunday. First, the documents. One clean folder by the door. Second, Walter agreed to be present as executor of the estate, standing where he had every right to stand. And third, the quiet phone call this whole story turns on. I called the county sheriff's office. I didn't ask them to arrest anyone. I told them the plain truth. I was the recorded owner of a property. Family members had delivered a written threat to remove me by force on Sunday, and I wanted a deputy present to keep the peace. The dispatcher took it seriously. She said a deputy would be there. That was it. No trap. No clever speech rehearsed in a mirror. Just the law, quietly arranged to already be standing in my driveway before my family arrived to break it. They came at 9. My father's truck, the rented moving truck, rattling the morning quiet. My mother's car, Carol's, the cousins behind. They parked across the grass without a thought for it. My mother reached the bottom step and went straight to the sentence that had worked on me my whole life. Sign it over, Avery. Do the decent thing. My father climbed the steps past her, walking right through the last living stretch of my grandmother's lavender, crushing it under his good Sunday shoes. He stopped a foot from me, using his height the way he always had. We're done waiting, he said. Get your things. I watched his face, ready to answer, when his eyes moved past me, toward the side of the house, toward the two people who had just stepped quietly around the corner. And then the room went completely silent. Even the moving truck seemed to hold its breath. It was Walter, in his gray suit, the estate file under his arm, and beside him, a uniformed deputy from the county, thumbs in his belt, in no hurry at all. I set my coffee on the rail, picked up the folder, and walked down to meet them on the grass, where everyone could see. I didn't raise my voice. I have found you almost never need to. This is Walter, executor of the estate. This is Deputy Reyes. I asked them both to be here. I held the folder out until the silence made my father take it. That's the recorded deed to this house. That's the will. That's the video of your parents signing, clear-eyed in a lawyer's office. The deputy spoke, flat and easy. This property is legally hers, folks. There's no court order. Any attempt to remove her is trespass, and I'll treat it that way. The truck needs to leave. But it was Walter who took the air out of all of them. He slid out a single page and held it up so my father could see his own signature. When you filed your challenge, you walked straight into the no contest clause Raymond built into this will. If you press it and lose, and you will lose, you forfeit every cent he set aside for you. They had come for $40 million. They were leaving with less than they'd walked in with. My father turned on me last, ragged, and reached for the only weapon he'd ever had. It should have gone to grade, he shouted, the fourth time I'd heard it. And in the quiet right after, with the deputy beside me and the lavender crushed under his shoes, I gave him the answer I'd been saving. It did go to family, I said. You just could never see who that was. The petition was dismissed 2 months later in a hearing that took under an hour. The no contest clause held exactly as my grandfather designed it, and the small bequests passed instead into the foundation, the last piece of his test clicking shut. Because I didn't keep the $40 million, I gave the town the answer it had been waiting for. I started the Crane Lake Foundation, scholarships for kids who don't get many, roof repairs and ramps for the old folks who gave that town 60 years, and a program for veterans coming home to a place that loves them but doesn't always know how to reach them, the way no one ever quite knew how to reach me. The lake house became its heart, not a museum, not a trophy, a house with an open door and a long table and a porch where someone always waits for the answer. When you ask, "How was your day?" My mother lost her house that fall. I'd warned her and given her the name of a counselor and a county program. She used neither. Some people would rather drown holding their pride than reach for a hand they by enter. It's decided to hate. My father, I haven't spoken to since the porch, but Trevor surprised me. 3 weeks after his son was born, he sent me 2 words. "I'm sorry." I wrote back, "When you're ready to mean it, you know where the lake is. The door is unlatched, neither locked nor flung wide, just open, for whoever's willing to do the work of walking through it." I still live in the lake house. I still wind the clock. And for the first time in my life, no one will ever again make me prove I belong. Because family was never the people who shared my name. Family is the people who would never once make you prove it. And the moment you understand that, you stop knocking on doors that were always going to stay shut, and you go build a house of your own with the door already open.